Out on the dust-choked plains of the Wild West, hunger could drive a person to do the unthinkable. When a desperate young woman named Clara Monroe offered the only thing she had left, herself, in exchange for a meal, she never expected a rancher's reply to change her life forever. He looked her in the eyes and said, "Gold isn't what we need. We need you." What happened on that lonely ranch that turned despair into destiny? Let's find out.
Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin.
The sun burned low over the endless plains, bleeding gold across the sky and turning every shadow long and lonely. The land around Clara Monroe had forgotten mercy, cracked earth, dead grass, and silence that pressed like a weight on her chest. For days she'd followed a wagon trail that had long gone cold, the dust clinging to her skin, the wind biting through her torn dress. Her boots, once her father's pride, were splitting at the seams. She pressed a trembling hand to her stomach. It had been 2 days since her last meal, just a crust of bread stolen from an abandoned trading post. Hunger wasn't a pain anymore. It was a numbness spreading through her bones. Around her wrist fluttered a faded blue ribbon, the only thing she had left from her mother. It reminded her of gentler days, when the smell of bread filled their small home and the world felt kind. On the horizon, a shimmer rose. Smoke, maybe? Or a mirage born of hope? Clara squinted against the sun, her heartbeat quickening despite the weakness in her legs. She whispered to herself, voice cracked and soft, "Please, let it be real." Her knees gave way once, then twice, but she forced herself up again. Somewhere beyond the heat and dust, she heard the faint bawl of cattle. That sound, real, alive, was enough to keep her moving. By the time the sun dipped below the ridge, the outline of a ranch came into view. Wooden fences, a windmill turning slow. Life, food, salvation. She staggered toward it, unaware that this desperate walk would be the last time she'd ever beg for anything again. By the time Clara Monroe reached the ranch gates, her vision blurred. The air shimmered with heat, and the world tilted sideways. A sharp voice cut through the haze. "Hey, you alive there?" Then everything went dark. When she woke, she was lying on a rough cot in a long wooden room that smelled of leather, sweat, and tobacco. Lantern light flickered across the faces of half a dozen ranch hands. Their laughter stopped when she stirred. "Well, look what the wind dragged in," said Jed Cooper, a wiry young cowboy with a cruel grin. He leaned on a post, eyes sliding over her dirt-streaked dress. "You hungry, girl?" Clara swallowed, too weak to speak. She nodded. "Food ain't free," another man muttered. "You got coin?" Her lips trembled. "No, but I can." She hesitated, the shame heavy in her throat. "I can offer something else." A few of the men snickered, closing in, but before anyone could move, a strong hand clamped on Jed's shoulder. "That's enough," came a calm, commanding voice. Owen Tate, the ranch foreman, stepped forward, eyes cold as iron. "You touch her, and you'll answer to me." The room fell silent. The only sound was Clara's shallow breathing and the creak of floorboards. Owen looked down at her, his tone softening. "You're safe here, miss. We'll get you food." As he handed her a tin cup of water, she tried to thank him, but the words broke apart in her throat. Clara thought she'd reached her end, but fate wasn't done with her yet. What happens when a stranger steps in and changes everything? Don't turn away now. This is just the beginning. The bunkhouse door swung open with a hard gust of wind, and every man inside went still. Boots crossed the threshold, measured, confident. James Callahan filled the doorway, the late sun at his back, turning him into a tall shadow rimmed with gold. His hat was pulled low, his jaw dusted with stubble, and his voice came calm but sharp as a whip. "What's going on here?" Owen straightened. "Found her collapsed out by the fence line. She needs food." James's gaze shifted to Clara Monroe, still clutching the tin cup with both trembling hands. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing just slightly, not in suspicion, but in something closer to concern. "You hurt?" Clara shook her head. "Just hungry, sir." James nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Then you'll eat. No debt, no deal." He turned to the others. "You feed a starving soul 'fore you ask her what she's worth. That's how it works on my land." The men dropped their eyes. Jed muttered something under his breath, but one look from James shut him up quick. He crouched near Clara, voice low enough only she could hear. "You don't owe anyone here a thing. You understand me?" Her throat tightened. "Why would you help me?" James looked toward the window where the dying light fell across the dry fields. "Because gold isn't what we need out here," he said softly. "We need people who don't give up." Dawn rose pale and cool over the Callahan ranch. The smell of coffee and wood smoke drifted through the air as Clara Monroe woke on a clean cot for the first time in weeks. Her muscles ached, but her heart felt strangely steady. Someone had left a folded dress and a note on the table. "Kitchen starts at sunup. O.T." In the kitchen, Clara found Owen Tate already at work, stirring a pot of beans over the fire. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Thought you might want to earn that meal." She smiled faintly. "I'd be grateful to." Before long, she was mixing dough, feeding the fire, and sweeping the dusty floorboards. Her hands remembered how to work, how to move with purpose. By breakfast, the air smelled of fresh biscuits and hope. The men filed in, surprised to find the table set and warm food waiting. Even the roughest among them offered shy nods. From outside, James Callahan watched through the window. The sight of her, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, moving with quiet determination, pulled something inside him he hadn't felt in years. Maybe peace. Maybe something deeper. Owen caught his glance. "Girl's got grit," he said. James nodded slowly. "She's got more than that. She's got reason." As the sun climbed higher, Clara stepped out to hang laundry on the line. The prairie wind tugged her hair, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled. For the first time in months, Clara feels like she belongs somewhere. But out on the prairie, peace never lasts long. Stay with us to see what tests her strength next. By the end of the week, Clara Monroe had found her rhythm. Up before sunrise, chores done by noon, supper hot by dusk. The men had grown used to her presence, though not all of them kindly. At the far end of the corral, Jed Cooper leaned on a fence post, chewing tobacco and talking low. "You all see how she looks at the boss?" he sneered. "Bet she's after more than a meal." A few men chuckled nervously. Word traveled fast across dry land, and by sundown whispers rode the wind like dust. Inside the barn, Owen Tate overheard enough. He stepped from the shadows, voice quiet but dangerous. "You talk about her again, Jed, and you'll be shoveling horse dung from here to Kansas." Jed's smirk faltered. "Ain't doing no harm, just saying what folks are thinking." "Then stop thinking like a fool," Owen snapped. "The girl's got more grit than half the hands here combined." Later, when James Callahan heard of the talk, he found Jed near the stables. "If a man in my employ can't hold his tongue," he said, "he can ride out before the sun sets." Jed swallowed hard, the message clear. That night, as Clara washed dishes in the dim kitchen light, Owen lingered at the doorway. "Don't mind the noise," he said gently. "You're doing fine work. Folks'll see it soon enough." She smiled faintly, though her heart still ached. On the prairie, rumors spread quicker than rain, and both could ruin a harvest. The next afternoon brought a rare, cool breeze across the plains. Clara Monroe took the water buckets and followed the trail down to the river that wound behind the Callahan ranch. The air smelled of dust and pine, and for a while she let herself breathe. The soft rush of the current was the only sound she'd heard in days that wasn't work or worry. Kneeling at the edge, she dipped a bucket into the stream and watched the ripples fan outward. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, sunburned cheeks, a girl who'd seen too much in too short a time. Behind her came the steady crunch of boots. Owen Tate stepped out of the trees, carrying a coiled rope. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "You didn't. Just thought maybe the river was talking to me." He chuckled. "If it did, it'd probably tell you to rest. You've worked yourself near hollow." They stood in easy silence for a moment. Then Clara asked softly, "Why is Mr. Callahan so kind? Most men out here don't give without reason." Owen's face grew thoughtful. "James lost someone once, a wife. Took the fire right out of him. You being here, maybe it reminds him there's still good left." Clara looked toward the horizon, where gray clouds began to gather. A storm was rolling in, heavy and low. "Sometimes the past isn't buried. It's waiting to be faced. The storm's coming, and with it, the truth that'll shake the ranch to its roots. Don't miss what happens next." The storm rolled in at dusk, a wall of thunder that shook the windows of the bunkhouse. Most of the men turned in early, but Jed Cooper stayed awake, nursing a bottle of whiskey and a festering grudge. Rain drummed on the roof while lightning flashed in quick, angry bursts. Somewhere in the barn, Clara Monroe worked late, tying down the feed sacks before the wind tore through. Jed watched her silhouette through the doorway, the lantern light painting her in gold. His jealousy twisted into something mean. He stumbled toward her, boots squelching in the mud. "Evening, sweetheart," he slurred. "Heard the boss thinks mighty high of you. Bet you done more'n cook to earn that spot." Clara straightened, gripping the rope in her hands. "Go back inside, Jed. You've had too much." He laughed, low and ugly, stepping closer. "Don't play innocent with me." When he reached for her, she swung the rope hard across his arm, shouting, "Don't touch me!" The sound carried through the rain. Suddenly, a gun cocked. Owen Tate stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, his expression thunder dark. "Step away from her," he said. Jed froze, breathing hard. "Just talking, Foreman. Nothing wrong with—" Owen grabbed him by the collar, dragging him into the mud. "You're done here, Cooper." The next morning, James Callahan rode Jed off the property himself. No yelling, no threats, just quiet fury in his eyes. When he returned, he found Clara sitting by the stove, hands shaking. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Long as you're under this roof, no man will harm you." For the first time, she believed him. Morning came, gray and uneasy. The air felt too still, the kind of quiet that made animals restless. Clara Monroe was hanging laundry when the first echo of hooves rolled across the plain. She turned toward the horizon and saw dust rising, fast and thick. Owen Tate came running from the stables. "Riders! At least a dozen!" Within moments, the ranch erupted into motion. Men grabbed rifles, slammed shutters, and herded the cattle toward the back pens. James Callahan strode out, shotgun in hand, his voice cutting through the panic. "No one runs! Hold your ground!" The Dalton riders thundered in, faces masked, guns flashing. Bullets ripped through fences, splinters flying. Clara ducked behind a water trough, heart hammering. When she saw Owen pinned near the barn, she grabbed a rifle from the porch. Her father's lessons came back sharp as instinct. She aimed and fired. The outlaw dropped from his horse, buying Owen time to fight back. The noise was deafening, the air thick with smoke and grit. When the last rider fled into the distance, the ranch stood scarred but alive. The ground was littered with spent shells and trampled earth. James found Clara kneeling beside a wounded hand, pressing cloth to his side. Their eyes met, fierce and breathless. "You saved him," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Just did what needed doing." Clara just proved she's more than anyone expected. But the fight isn't over yet. What comes after the gunfire might change everything between her and James. The dawn after the raid broke soft and pale, the air heavy with smoke and silence. Clara Monroe stood near the corral, her hands still trembling, though the gunfire had stopped hours ago. The ground was wet with rain and blood alike, the smell of gunpowder clinging to everything. She'd worked through the night, bandaging wounds, hauling water, doing anything to keep from thinking. Inside the barn, James Callahan sat on a hay bale, a strip of linen tied around his arm where a bullet had grazed him. When Clara stepped in, her eyes widened. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," he said, but his voice was rough, tired. She knelt beside him anyway, tearing a fresh strip from her apron and pressing it gently against his arm. "You shouldn't have been out front alone," she murmured. His eyes lifted to hers. "Couldn't ask my men to stand where I wouldn't." The simple honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. For a long moment neither spoke. The storm outside had passed, but inside something quieter stirred. Trust, respect, something neither dared name. When the bandages were tied, James caught her wrist softly. "You saved lives out there," he said, "mine included." Clara shook her head, eyes glistening. "I just couldn't watch good men fall." James smiled faintly. "You've got more courage than most I've known." Outside, the sky cleared, and a shaft of sunlight cut through the barn's open door. For the first time, the land looked alive again. Night fell quiet over the Callahan ranch. The men had turned in early, exhausted from rebuilding fences and burying the fallen. Only the steady crackle of the kitchen fire broke the stillness. Clara Monroe sat by the window, mending a torn sleeve by lantern light, her thoughts drifting to the battle, to the look in James Callahan's eyes when he thanked her. The door creaked. James stepped inside, hat in hand, his shirt collar open, the faint scent of smoke still clinging to him. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "Too many memories when it's quiet." He nodded slowly, pulling out a chair across from her. "You know, I built this place, thinking land and cattle would be enough. But after my wife passed, all this," he gestured around the room, "felt like an empty echo." Clara's hands stilled on the fabric. "You've given me more kindness than I deserve, Mr. Callahan." "James," he corrected softly. "And you've given this place back its heartbeat, Clara." She looked up, her breath catching. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Gold isn't what we need here. We need you." The words settled between them like a promise, warm and unshakable. He's finally said the words she never thought she'd hear. But will Clara believe she deserves a new life, or run from it? Find out in the final act. The morning broke with the low growl of thunder far off in the hills. The air smelled different, rich, heavy, alive. For weeks the land had begged for rain, and now dark clouds rolled in like a long-awaited answer. In the ranch yard, James Callahan stood by the porch, straightening his cleanest shirt. Owen Tate adjusted his hat, a rare smile tugging at his mouth. "Didn't think I'd see this day, boss," he said. James chuckled quietly. "Didn't think I'd live to want it again." From inside the house, Clara Monroe stepped out wearing a simple cream dress that had once belonged to James's late wife. The hem brushed the wet earth, her mother's blue ribbon tied at her wrist. She looked uncertain, yet radiant, like the prairie after its first rain. A preacher from the nearby town stood between them, Bible in hand. The first drops began to fall, cool and soft, as the vows were spoken. "I reckon the good Lord's blessing this one himself," Owen murmured as thunder rumbled overhead. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," James hesitated only a heartbeat before pulling Clara close. The rain came harder, washing dust and sorrow from the air. For the first time, laughter returned to the ranch. The men cheered, hats raised high as the rain poured down. Clara looked up at James, smiling through tears. "Guess the drought's finally over." He brushed a wet strand from her face. "Yeah," he whispered, "in more ways than one." The prairie woke to the soft hush of morning. Mist clung low over the fields, and every blade of grass shimmered with dew. For the first time in months, the land looked alive again. Clara Callahan, no longer Monroe, stood on the porch wrapped in James's old coat, watching the cattle graze in the distance. The air smelled of wet earth and promise. Behind her, James Callahan stepped out, carrying 2 tin cups of coffee. He handed her one, his hand brushing hers, warm and steady. "Ground's drinking it up fast," he said, nodding toward the damp soil. "Never thought I'd see green this soon." Clara smiled softly. Guess the land was just waiting for someone to believe in it again. He studied her face, the quiet strength in her eyes. "You've changed this place, Clara. Not with gold or luck, just with heart." She glanced down at her wrist, where the faded blue ribbon still rested, rain-worn but whole. "Pa used to say, when the world takes everything from you, it's just making room for what's next." James set his cup aside and took her hand. "Then I reckon this is what's next." The sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the wet fields. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, a smile tugging at her lips. "I tried to trade my worth once," she whispered. "Didn't know I already had it." James kissed her forehead. "You were the gold all along." And as the light spread across the ranch, everything, land, love, and life, began again. Seasons turned, and the Callahan Ranch thrived again. Fields bloomed where dust once ruled. laughter replaced silence, and love stood where hunger had been. Each morning, Clara Callahan tied her mother's blue ribbon around her wrist, a quiet reminder that worth isn't something you trade, it's something you carry. And out on the golden prairie, the wind whispered her truth. She was the gold all along.
Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.